Happy Thursday evening, Minnesota Twins fans. Thank you so much for joining another episode of Twins Daily's Offseason Live. And before we get started, I definitely want to say that I am Seth Stoes of Twins Daily, and I'm going to try to take the spot of Nick Nelson, who's done an amazing job with these Offseason Live episodes. But it is his birthday. He is pretty old now, so be sure to wish him a happy birthday. But again, thank you for listening. Hopefully you'll enjoy the show. We're going to talk some Twins free agent or which free agent targets the Twins might have in terms of starting pitching. And to help me do that, I'm going to be joined by a couple of fellow Twins Daily participants and writers. Join me in welcoming Tom Fromming and Nate Palmer. Hello, fellas.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Seth.
Well, it should be a lot of fun, I think, talking Twins starters, and we're going to do that here in just a minute. But before we do that, I think, we're all baseball fans. Did you guys watch the World Series? And I guess, Tom, what was your big storyline of the World Series? I think I have an idea. What was your thought?
I enjoyed this entire postseason outside of the Twins getting bounced right away. Just a lot of really good baseball. I enjoy all the weird pitching stuff, all the weird management. So to me, the big takeaway was Dave Roberts mixing and matching his pitching staff so well. There were some other pitching decisions that kind of overshadowed the things that worked. And, he did treat Kershaw and Buehler as sort of traditional starters. But from there, starting guys like Gonsolin and May and, having them go barely, maybe an inning or two. And then they would start Urias some games he'd pitch in a long middle relief role. Other games, like in the game 6, he would close out the last 3 innings. So I just thought it was really, you never knew what was going to happen with that pitching staff from one game to the next, and it was just so fun to follow.
For sure. How about you, Nate? What were some of your overriding thoughts as you watched the World Series, if you watched the World Series?
I didn't get to catch, everything. I often got in at the end of a game or something, or got a little bit here and there, definitely. But I was just thinking about, especially thinking of where the Twins have been recently, how the Dodgers are able to make kind of those right button moves. You think of going and getting Mookie Betts, even getting Graterol. Even though the Twins ended up well with the Maeda side, and Graterol didn't necessarily do quite the same stuff in the postseason as he did in the regular season, but still it was kind of just looking at that overall composition of that team, how they're able to kind of just push those right buttons along the way and get in and get that trophy at the end.
Yeah, and for me, I'm kind of a guy who people are always surprised that I don't watch a lot of playoff baseball, but I'll be honest, the 3-batter minimum might have altered that a little bit. I love the fact that there weren't 5 pitching changes in an inning. The game did seem to move along a little faster. And frankly, it's the World Series, so you have those moments. You have Brett Phillips with the walk-off string airplaning through the outfield and his interview. But, again, John Curtis and Nick Anderson each getting a win. I know Nick Anderson didn't pitch as well. Obviously, he has the last 2 seasons in the World Series, but again, you feel good for that. You feel good for Brewstar. I feel good for Dave Roberts. And frankly, and I tweeted this several times, Corey Seager has become my favorite non-Twins player, even surpassing Francisco Lindor, because he's awesome. So with that, again, I want to remind you, this is Offseason Live. We are going to talk free agent starting pitchers tonight with Tom Fromming, Nate Palmer from Twins Daily. But I also want to welcome you, whether you're watching on Twins Daily Twitter, Facebook, Periscope, YouTube. Feel free to send us your questions. And as we go through some of our starting pitching options, we certainly welcome your opinion and feedback. We'll put some of that up on the screen, and we'll answer your questions and get your feedback. So with that, the Twins did make some news. When the World Series completed on Tuesday night, right away Wednesday morning, everyone that could become a free agent became a free agent, and that included, I think, 7 or 8 Twins players. The obvious ones, Nelson Cruz, Trevor May, Tyler Clippard, Alex Avila, Ray Adrianza. I'm doing this by memory, so I'm going to forget a few, but Rich Hill, and maybe another one. But the news came out last night. Lavelle Neal from the Star Tribune found out first that the Twins were declining the 2021 option for $5 million to Sergio Romo, instead paying him $250,000 as a buyout. Now, that doesn't mean they won't bring him back, but let's start with Nate this time. Nate, your thoughts? Was that an easy decision, difficult decision? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a pretty easy one. Over all these shows, we've been talking about payroll. We've been talking about how it has the potential to be really tight. And when it looked, they aren't the same necessarily, but you kind of have similar type pitchers that are going to be able to come back much cheaper in Whistler and Thielbar. How often during the World Series did they highlight the fact that the Rays had all these guys coming out of the pen with these different arm angles? And so you have guys who can kind of step up and maybe have the same kind of delivery, use of sliders, that kind of a thing, or curveball and Thielbar's in his case. So I thought it was pretty easy. You could still possibly bring him back if you really feel like he's someone that you need in that bullpen. But I think it was, based on the money, a pretty easy thing to make the decision on and go that direction.
Tom, what are your thoughts? I guess beyond was it an easy decision, do you think that he should be someone they consider bringing back? Sure, but should they target bringing him back at a reduced cost?
Oh, he makes sense still. Now that May and Clippard and Romo are removed from this bullpen picture, we're not really certain on whether, anybody else is going to be non-tendered. In addition to those three, you're missing a pretty good chunk of your 2020 bullpen that was very successful. I do agree that at the price point, I would be very surprised if Romo was able to get $5 million on the open market this year. But he is a guy who has pitched pretty well for the most part. He started out great in 2020 for the Twins, really faded down the stretch. He is getting up there in age. But I think he did bring some veteran presence and also some fire and energy. And, he's a funny guy in that he's so intense on the field and such a seemingly like a laid back kind of a guy with a great sense of humor off the field. He just seems like he'd be a really good guy to be, traveling with, just be around as a teammate. I think they'll probably show interest in bringing him back. But as far as that decision in its own, I wasn't too surprised about it.
Yeah, I'd say very little surprise. And as far as targeting him, I mean, maybe it's just me, but when it's still October, early November, I think my targets would be a little bit higher ceiling. And the fact that we don't know what the payroll will be, have no idea on that other than we assume it'll probably be down across baseball, that may make more guys available. And but again, I think upside at this time of the offseason, and those are the types of guys that'll probably be around in January or February, and we'll know a little bit more back then. All right, let's get to what we were here to talk about, and that, of course, is pitching. And we'll let Ron Brown ask the question here to kind of get us started. On Facebook, Ron asked, the Twins need pitching, as always. What do you think the free agent market will cost? And that is what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about some guys. How we're going to do this is how we've done previous free agent target episodes, and that is each of us picked out 3 names, and we're going to promote those guys and then let the others either tear that pick apart or, maybe back it up a little bit. And then we'll get your feedback. So again, leave your comments. We'll try to keep up with those. We're already getting quite a few here in the chat, but keep them coming. We want you to enjoy this. We want it to be interactive. So with that, let's kind of take a look at some of the options that are out there. And while we look at this options, this is certainly not a complete list of pitchers that are available this offseason. As Tom basically yelled at me before the show, there is no Homer Bailey shown here, and he is
no respect.
The Twins could bring back. So with that, let's real briefly talk about the landscape of the Twins pitching staff. And I wrote a little bit about this. I think we all feel really good about the starting 3 that includes Kenta Maeda, who should get Cy Young votes, Jose Barrios, who's still very young and has been to 2 All-Star games, and Michael Pineda, who returned this year pretty much as if he hadn't missed a full season with a suspension. So that's a pretty good starting point. From there, it gets a little bit more questionable. Randy Dobnak was one of the best pitchers in the American League the first 5 or 6 weeks. How much do we want to rely upon that going forward? Can you pencil him as the 4 starter? Can you pencil him as the 5 starter? And where do guys like Lewis Thorpe or Devin Smeltzer, who were competing with Dobnak just this last spring, where do they fit into the equation? Or are they both kind of long relief bullpen arms like they were in 2020? And then, of course, you've got prospects. And we like to think, although there is no such thing as a pitching prospect, Joan Duran, Jordan Balazovic, Dakota Chalmers, and some other guys are working their way through the system. The 3 that I just mentioned are all at least at AA. So all of that kind of factors in. I want to start with you, Tom, and just as you look at this list of names and as you thought about pitchers that you would target this offseason for the Twins, what are some of those things, that the attributes that you'd look for in bringing in a starting pitcher this offseason?
It always depends on kind of the composition of the rest of the team. I would like to point out, I think we're in this mindset as Twins fans that the Twins always need pitching. We always need pitching. This was actually like a top 5 pitching staff in baseball last year. So you can never have enough pitching. Nobody ever has enough. So I'm not saying that mentality isn't true, but it's not as maybe on point as it would be in prior years or what we're used to with the Twins. Given that the floor, as you really detailed well, the floor of this rotation right now is very, very high. Even with Domdak as the penciled in as the 4, you have guys who've shown they can get it done at the major league level. So kind of in this offseason with this composition of the team, I'm kind of looking for some upside especially if we're looking along the fringes for maybe 4 or 5 type guys. I'm looking for more upside than sort of guys who provide more of that floor.
All right, Nate, as you were providing a list of names for us to consider here tonight, what were some of the factors you considered?
Yeah, just to bounce off of what Tom was saying, I think the big thing is that a number 1 would be nice, but it's not like in those past years where we're clamoring that we absolutely need to go find a top line arm. We can roll with the 3 that there are. And I unfortunately think that payroll episode killed me, because I had a hard time dreaming too big after talking about what our payroll for the Twins could look like. So I was looking at a lot of guys who could limit walks and hits, as well as limit some of the hard contact if possible. Not all of my guys that I did bring forward meet that criteria, but those are some of the things that I had put at the top of everything as I was going through all the names.
All right. And for me, I probably didn't think about this as deeply as I probably should, but for me, I have no problem with bringing in the Rich Hills or Homer Baileys to compete for that 5th spot to provide depth, because as we know, especially in a 162 game season, you're going to need 7-8 starters if you're lucky, and probably more like 10 to 12. So I have no problem with bringing those kinds of players in. So either that end, but even then I'm looking for something within them. The one thing, for me is spin rate. I don't know spin rates necessarily, didn't look at that, but what percentage of breaking balls did guys use? We saw what they did with Matt Whistler. We saw the success of Sergio Romo pitching. We saw the success with Tyler Duffy's curveball and slider. So Taylor Rogers' key pitch is a slider probably. I looked at that and just asked myself, I wonder what Wes Johnson and staff could do with this. So the other side that I would look at is this. If you're going to put I don't mind guys competing for the 5th spot, but if they're going to go get a pitcher, I want someone that can compete with those top 3, and you can say he might be number 3, he might be number 2. I'm not saying he has to be number 1, but if he can be at the same level as those top 3, I think that's very much exciting to me. So with that, I posted a couple of comments here from Michael that the payroll will come down dramatically. I don't know if it'll be 33 to 50%. As you mentioned, but I think we're assuming it'll be at least 10 to 20 drop from last year. And Tom has a great Twins podcast that you should subscribe to as well on YouTube. I know he had a whole rant on payroll here recently, episode on payroll recently that you should watch. So I'll encourage you to do that. And again, before we get started, Ron Brown comments, age and durability should be considered. And I think we would all agree with that, although the amount that you're going to pay is probably also dependent upon those 2 factors as well. So with that, let's get to our first pitcher that we're going to talk about here. And I'm trying to remember who brought up this name. Sorry about this. There he is, Mike Minor, and that is Nate's pick. So let's start with him. What is what's your backing for saying that the Twins should consider going after Mike Minor, who was with the A's last year? He was an all-star with the Rangers in 2019. Stayed healthy this year, but what are your thoughts on Minor, and what makes him an interesting choice for you?
So again, one of the first things that jumped out was that he, over the last 2 years, has had a walk per 9 under 3. He's got a decent whip he's at that 1.19 area over those times. He has the capability of popping up and being someone who can just lead a staff and go through these stretches of being almost that ace level type pitcher. I know there's been some questions with some velo drop, which is obviously you never like seeing any of that happen. But I think the hard thing is with this 2020, there wasn't quite the right ramp up. Wasn't the full length of season. So you don't know if you truly got kind of the whole breadth of what a guy would actually do over a full season. So maybe that's something that could go. He also has a pretty good track record of being able to get through and get some quality starts, which I think is going to be big, especially when you think of replacing someone like Odorizzi, who we've always had that question of, would he be able to take us long enough to at least kind of give the bullpen a little bit of a rest here and there? So he'd be one guy that we don't have to worry about always taxing and making that bullpen come in earlier than necessary. Now, obviously, there's always going to probably be the blow-up game, but overall, we hope that those things don't happen regularly.
All right, so how this is going to work is Nate made his case. Now Tom and I will either agree or disagree with him, depending on the pitcher. And again, we welcome you, whether you're on Twins Daily Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Leave your comments on these pitchers. The question, as you see it on your screen, should the Twins sign left-handed pitcher Mike Minor? Mike Minor. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, Mike Minor is another guy who, he would bring something a little different. He's a left-handed started pitcher. I think that is maybe not advantageous for the AL Central, but hopefully we have a regular season next year and there's not almost only games against the AL Central, so that'd be less of an issue. And yeah, a lot of peripherals are pretty good, and he's an established guy. So I think he's another guy who kind of helps fill out that floor and really gives you a lot of security in the rotation.
All right, so Mike Minor, he will be, I think, 32 through much of the season next year, 33. When it comes to durability, he missed 2015 and 2016, but as I mentioned earlier, he was an all-star in 2019. Very good. In fact, he was hitting 93 and even 94 miles per hour in 2019. Nate, you mentioned it already. His average fastball this year was about 90.6, if I can read my handwriting, and that's a 3 mile per hour drop. And it makes me a little bit nervous. But he is a 4-pitch pitcher, and I can't argue with the things that you guys are saying as far as being a veteran, being a guy that should be relied upon when healthy to provide a few innings. And he's obviously younger than Rich Hill, but I'm going to bring up 2 comments here. Ron Brown brings up this comment. Minor should not cost too much, and he is left-handed. Now, we have him estimated at about $10 million for one season, and I don't know if he would take multiple seasons after a tough 2020 season. He might take a 2-year deal. So, I mean, maybe that's a little high, understanding the market. Left-handed, I do think, is a positive thing. We're going to go to Mike here. And Mike, of course, is not interested. He'd rather keep Odorizzi. And, maybe that's part of what we need to consider. I will give it away here. Don't quit watching because of this. We talked about Jake Odorizzi in a previous episode when we talked about Twins free agents. We talked about him and Hill. So we're not going to necessarily go into them. But I do think that's a fair criteria, is to say if we're going to look for somebody and pay them a little bit, they better be just as good as Odorizzi, who, again, he was an all-star in 2019, just like Mike Minor. So with that, let's bump up to the next one. Although we'll admit that Ron agrees Odo would be better. Let's go to the next choice here, and I believe that is Tom's choice, and he's touting Marcus Stroman, the right-hander who has spent most of his career with the Toronto Blue Jays, but of course he was traded in the middle of 2019 to the Mets. He opted out in 2020. Tom, your thoughts?
And how I broke this down on these, we each picked 3 guys, and I picked like a guy who I thought would be a 1-2 starter, and then a 3-4, and then a 4-5 around. It was kind of how I got to these. So Marcus Stroman was that guy in that 1-2 range who I really thought looked attractive to me, and I will just never forget his 2017 World Baseball Classic final. He will forever be one of my favorite players ever because of that. I just love this guy, his makeup. He lives by the creed of height doesn't measure heart. He's 5'7", and he carries himself like he's about 11 feet tall. He's got a lot of swagger, and I don't think it's like a showing up the opponent swagger. It's like just a lot of self-confidence. I think if you're looking for a guy who, as a peer to Jose Barrios, who might come in and kind of elevate Jose Barrios, who's another guy who has a chip on his shoulder about his height. He's not nearly as short as Stroman, but Jose had faced those things during being a prospect and signing and all that stuff, being drafted. I think this is a guy you bring into this organization. They're losing some fire with Romo being gone potentially, and I think that is something that you have to keep in mind. I do think adding Josh Donaldson's personality could end up being a positive for this team. I think they need some personalities like that. But Stroman missed all of 2020. Speaking of Donaldson, Stroman had a strained calf that kept him out originally, and then he opted out. But this is a guy, despite his size, he has 3 seasons in which he started 30 more games. He has 2 seasons in which he delivered 200-plus innings pitched. He's an all-star in 2019. Speaking of that, quite a bit's coming up pretty often. And he was 12th among qualified starters in ERA that year. This is a ground ball machine, Marcus Stroman. You may say, well, that might not fit the Twins. They don't have the best defensive infield. That fits any team. You'd rather have a ground ball pitcher than a fly ball pitcher. Yeah, a team with a great defensive infield his numbers he produces may end up being better on that team for like fantasy baseball purposes. But all things being equal, you'd much rather have a ground ball specialist than a fly ball pitcher.
Hey, before we jump to Nate for your thoughts on Stroman and your argument to Tom's case, we're going to let Cody make an argument. And Tom, you got to answer this one. Sam Deduno was decent in the WBC. Might need a little bit more.
Sign him up.
Let's get Deduno back. All right, Nate.
Deduno abides.
Nate, your thoughts on Stroman and Tom's argument?
No, he's definitely another guy. I mean, you can maybe worry about the year off, but I think there's going to be ways to get him back in, ramped back up. And he's going to limit home runs, which is going to be big when you talk about the bats that the Twins are going to continue to see. So this is another, if we can get him, if the Twins could get him in and get him into the payroll, I think I'll be very happy with having Stroman coming in one of those spots.
All right. So those of you listening, again, feel free to share your thoughts on Marcus Stroman. For me, it's hard to get too excited. I think we listed him as $13 million for next year, and I'd have to think he would take, especially since he's just 29. You're looking at probably a 3 or 4 year deal at $13 or more million. Now, of course, we don't know how the economics will play. It'll be interesting to see if guys are willing to take 1 year deals for this year to let things kind of work themselves out. But there might be a play stoppage, and there's not a collective bargaining agreement the following year. So they may want to take the money while they can. So it's going to be a really interesting thing. The lack of strikeouts does alarm me, but the fact that he's fastball, cutter, and a good curveball, that's an interesting mix. I don't know how much that's a spin rate type of a pitcher, the way that, this Twins front office is known for liking the spin rate, for liking the curveball. But one other thing about Stroman is he's a great fielder, which ties in to Maeda, who is just listed as an option or a finalist for the AL Gold Glove for pitchers, and Jose Barrios, who was last year and I think is really good. Now, Michael Pineda doesn't necessarily fit that mold, but Marcus Stroman certainly does. All right, let's grab some comments here. Brad comments, would take less after taking the qualifying offer last year while only providing 13 innings. I don't know if that's Stroman because he didn't pitch at all this year.
That must be OT, I'm thinking.
Okay. Let's see. Stroman, according to Ron, Stroman addition, but there might be too many other teams in the hunt. And that's absolutely fair. That's always part of free agency. Of course, the team, the Twins got Josh Donaldson last year in the offseason because they were willing to pay him more than anybody else was. So that's what it comes down to, and how much is too much, we shall see. But I do think that Stroman's interesting. I really do. I've always liked him. He is young. He has pitched on some bad teams. He's pitched with Donaldson. He's pitched in the AL East, which can be tough. All those things are reasons that I think they are worth considering. Again, 58% career ground ball rate. Tom, you mentioned that. Injuries in 2018, little bit this spring, but for the most part, I think he's been pretty durable, other than the Tommy John early in his career. So, all right, with that, my turn. And this is the one that, how do you not talk Trevor Bauer in an offseason where, frankly, he's not only the best pitcher, but you kind of look ahead, he's really the only big pitcher this offseason. And what's intriguing about him is, we all know the downside. He is an enigma. He probably gets himself in a little bit of trouble in social media for things he said. It's not even to say he's right or wrong, but he definitely puts himself out there. It's fun. It's fun to watch. Most importantly, though, look at the numbers he put up in 2020. 73 innings, 1.73 ERA, 0.80 whip, struck out a ton, throws a ton of strikes. Whatever it was, he will probably win the NL Cy Young. And again, he's the best pitcher on the market. I guess the reason that I'm intrigued by him is just because think of the Twins starting rotation in 2021. If you've got Maeda, Barrios, and Pineda, and none of them is your number one starter because Trevor Bauer is your number one, that's a pretty good rotation. Although I do want to point this out, his season ERA starting in 2014, so we're looking at 7 seasons here, 4.18, 4.55, 4.26, 4.19, 2.21, 4.48, 1.73. So I don't know that he's the given ace that people think. Those ERAs in the 4s put him below the Jose Barrios level, who has stayed at the 3.7 to 4.0 range each of those last 3 or 4 years. Here's the one reason I even think he's worth us discussing, because of the economics, because we don't know what's going to happen. 1 year might be an option for Trevor Bauer. Now, he has said all throughout his career, if he ever, in fact, he's famously known for saying that if he ever took a multi-year deal, he would let somebody shoot him in the groinal region with a ball. So, that may have been more of his arbitration free agency take. But with this offseason being kind of an unknown, he may choose to wait 1 year and just do another 1 year thing. So, again, you're talking about a guy who throws 93, 94 miles an hour. He has 3, 4, 5, 6 pitches. He's good. I think we can all agree he's a good pitcher. There's a distraction. Let's start with Nate on this one. Fight me.
I won't fight you in a vacuum, because in a vacuum, this makes all the sense in the world. Like you said, strikeouts, and that's going to weigh out any walks or hits he gives up. Over the last 3 seasons, he's gotten a quality start 67% of the time. You've got to be okay with that coming through. I think the problem is, if we're wondering if the Twins can bring back Nelson Cruz, unless he gets like the Pohlad exception because it's that 1 year deal, I'm sorry, my payroll brain kicks in and I just keep saying there's no way this happens unless maybe the Pohlads listen to Tom's rant and gets them to spend or something. But I'd love to have him. I just don't see it happening.
All right, before we jump to Tom, again, get your thoughts on whether the Twins should sign Trevor Bauer. Why or why not? Throw them in the comments. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, this guy's clearly the best pitcher on the market. But, just because I want to fight you on this, I tweeted this out that his last 20 starts and Michael Pineda has been better over his last 20 starts than Trevor Bauer has been over his last 20 starts. Now with Pineda, that's I think it stretches across 3 years you have to go, because he was injured and then suspended. And of course, Bauer has been so good this season that Pineda's never really put a stretch like Bauer just did together, but it just sort of illustrates your point you were making about how Bauer's been so up and down over his career. Bauer's definitely using something to doctor the baseball or to increase his grip, which is probably something that Michael Pineda's also been doing for a lot of his career as well. That was the thing when he was with the Yankees. I think his defense, he hasn't outright admitted it, but he's pointed out before that Major League Baseball doesn't doesn't really care. They don't actually enforce anything on guys using pine tar, whatever, when they're pitching. And his spin rate went up like crazy. Now, yes, the Reds are really affiliated with Driveline as Bauer is, so there's always a possibility this was all legit. But if at any point all of a sudden Major League Baseball decides we're tired of this guy, we're going to enforce the grip thing on him, you could see him plummet if all of a sudden this was because he was doctoring baseballs or using grip, and they all of a sudden decide we want to shut this guy up about it. We're going to be checking in on him. That could be a real problem. So that's just sort of to play devil as advocate. Every team in baseball should be in on Trevor Bauer, including the NPB, who he said he'll listen to offers from.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. All right, let's get some of your comments here. We'll start with Ron again. For Bauer, you'll have to outbid both LA teams. Now, of course, he's from UCLA, and I think from that area, probably a fair point. The Angels already have Rendon and Trout, and Ohtani will probably have to get paid at some point. But, I don't think he's going to take less to go play there. But they'll definitely, I'm sure, be part of the conversation. We'll get Mike's comment here. Pursuing Bauer would be fun, but after he says no, who should we pursue? Well, we've talked about 2. We've got a few more to go, so stay tuned. Heath makes the comment, Bauer wants to pitch as much as possible, and the first time Rocco pulls him after 5 shutout innings, he will probably chuck another ball over the center field fence. He might. Can't even really argue that one. I don't know. That's is that how he threw it so far on his way out of Cleveland?
All the pine tar, yeah. Cody gets it, Yeah,
absolutely.
Nobody can chuck a ball that far when they're gassed. They're so gassed they're getting removed from the game. I mean, how else would you chuck the ball that far? It's got to be something.
Yeah. No, we did have a $30 million deal, and I'm assuming that's a 1-year thing. I don't know what it will take, but it's shouldn't cost Garrett Cole type of money, especially in this economy. I'm thinking he's a 1-year guy, and he'll be 30 throughout most of the season next year. So we move on to some probably a little more realistic options? And we'll go back to Nate, who has the idea or the name Drew Smiley. There's a name that we've heard of for a long time.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those that you hope what 2020 brought out of Drew Smiley is something that can carry over. And when you're thinking of he's coming in as your 4th guy, maybe your 5th guy, you can maybe deal with some of the warts that would come in, especially based on the cost that you would get him at. You saw this year, his walks dropped, which is something that happened with Maeda. So maybe the Twins can continue to help get that out of him. He does still give up more walks and hits than maybe you would like. So that's where what I talk about the profile had at the beginning. This is one guy who really doesn't fully fit that profile very well. He can strike some guys out though. So you're going to get some of that coming in. But you would have some of the same questions with him as you would with bringing Odorizzi back of how far will he get in games? Do you have to think about how you have your bullpen ready to come in? But, he's kind of one of those guys that he might be able to throughout the season, keep that 4th spot pretty solid for you, as well as pop up and have some really good games every once in a while and help carry a little bit.
All right. Again, get your thoughts into the comments on Drew Smiley, but Tom, go ahead, make your pitch.
I like it. Another left-hander, which the Twins don't have a left-handed starter. Yeah, it was a small sample, but I feel like this guy's shown a lot of talent in previous years. He just hasn't stayed healthy. And again, when the floor of the rotation's kind of established, I'm not really like I don't think a guy can throw 30 starts. I'm not really that concerned because I feel like you have some depth that would be able to step in if a guy gets hurt. And then also, I'm going to talk about this with one of my guys later. Something that I like about considering some of these guys who would be more of like a 4 or 5, a little bit further down in the rotation is once it comes playoff time and you're in a short series, could that guy be a difference maker out of the bullpen? And I do think in that case, Drew Smiley could be a difference maker out of the bullpen in the postseason, kind of like in the role that the Astros used Framber Valdez against the Twins, in which your starter goes so far, and you just chuck this guy out there and see how he does from there. So yeah, I think Drew Smiley would make a lot of sense.
So that was going to kind of be my thought too, but
yeah, gotcha.
Back to reality. I mean, he was quite the prospect when he came up to Tigers. He had a couple of good years. He missed all of 2017, all of 2018. Worked 114 innings in 2019 with 2 teams and posted a 6.4 ERA, but he did have 120 strikeouts. And that's first year coming back from pretty major significant time off. The 26 and a third innings this year, this year was what it was. But the one thing I'd kind of note is that he'd always been a guy who was left-handed but was around 90 to 91. And this last year, he was 93 and a half, 94 miles per hour. So is he one of those guys that comes back from surgery and he eventually added 2 or 3 miles per hour? And he's still just 31. He could have another 3, 5, 6 good years. And especially, as Tom mentioned, maybe more later in the bullpen. He's a guy that's probably going to cost $6 to $8 million, maybe. Maybe not even that much just because how much time he's missed. But that 14.4 K per 9 is certainly intriguing. I think he's the kind of guy that if he's there late in the offseason, you feel pretty good about making him your 5 or 4 starter and feeling good about it. It's kind of like the Rich Hill situation where you got a guy who has been injured in the past. It's not quite the same because we knew that Hill would miss some of this season if it would have started as normal. But, I don't mind this one. And there's definitely a theme I think that we are that we're coming up with here. I think we all of our 9 pitchers, we've got a few lefties in here, and the fact that the Twins don't have a lefty starter, and really have been looking at their prospects after the Smeltzer Thorpe range, they're all right-handed as well. So any thoughts from anyone on Drew Smiley? Otherwise, we are going to jump forward. And continue our conversation.
It appears he's not quite the talker that Trevor Bauer is, I guess.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. And again, just to kind of reset here, we got about 20 minutes left. We got, I think, 4 or 5 starters more to talk about. Want to welcome your feedback, whether you're watching on Twins Daily Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. My name is Seth Stos of Twins Daily, joined by Twins Daily writers and our content editor, Tom Froming, and writer Nate Palmer. We thank them for joining us here tonight. And again, we welcome your questions and thoughts on these pitchers as we talk about them. But the next one we're going to talk about is another guy who was with the Giants last year. The Giants weren't very good, but there's some interesting starters. So, Tom, Kevin Gausman.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this guy up, especially just to bring him back into kind of the forefront of people's minds. I think he's like a remember that guy, a former number 4 overall pick. Never really materialized the way they would have liked in Baltimore. Ended up between Atlanta and Cincinnati in 2019, and I basically forgot about him, to be completely honest. And then he comes out this year and really breaks out. And if you look at his numbers, like he looks like he should be getting like a 3 or 4 year deal based on how he pitched. But I think, it is only 59 2/3 innings in this weird 2020 season. But he ranked 11th in strikeout percentage among pitchers who had 50-plus innings this year. That's a sample of 81 pitchers. He was 11th in strikeout percentage, right behind Kenta Maeda. So that gives you an idea of how dominant he was. And this, I'm not sure if this would make the Twins more or less interested, but he's also a split-finger fastball, split changeup specialist. Same pitch that Maeda really uses, but Gausman's a little bit different in that he pairs that with a 95 mile per hour fastball. So he is really intriguing to me. I think his market's going to be fascinating because if you buy into who he was in 2020, he's going to get paid. But again, it was less than 60 innings. So there's a chance teams might look at the greater sample and kind of not buy into it. And again, I'm just going to be really interested to see what this guy gets.
And again, we welcome your thoughts. But Nate, go ahead with your thoughts. I've written a lot about Gausman over the last 9 years, so I'm guessing that I will go last and gush. Go ahead, Nate.
So he was a guy that I had up, and I decided I think I went with Smiley over him. But as we've kind of been looking forward to tonight, I slowly feel like I've been man crushing on him. You look at his StatCast the little circles, and the worst one's at 46, and that's his barrel percentage. He's doing really well on all those things. I was reading on The Athletic, John Heyman had his top 40 free agents, and he mentioned what a weapon maybe he really could become if he improved one of his breaking pitches. And I thought, well, hey, do the Twins maybe have a guy who would be able to help that along? And so there's a place there when you think of Maeda coming over and be able to prove the way he did. Gausman could come over and maybe do something similar if Johnson's able to work some magic with him.
I had to post the comment from Mike about liking Gausman much better than Smiley right after Nick said pick Smiley over Gausman for this tonight. So with that, I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add than what you two have mentioned. I mean, I like this guy. In fact, I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I had in 2012, my pick for who the Twins should have taken with that number 2 overall pick was Gausman. We all love Buxton and such, and the Twins have obviously had a lot more success with athletic high school toolsy players, and Buxton's been fantastic. So I think we can say the Twins were right. But I love the concept of these guys. I mean, he was a college starter at LSU who hadn't been necessarily overworked, and was really just kind of a quick to the big leagues type. And like you said, didn't ever really pan out with the Orioles, but still throws 95. As for the breaking ball, that is a question. Nate brought that up, but looking at his pitch mix last year, just 7% sliders. Other than that, it was fastball, changeup, split finger. So if they can try to get him some sort of a curveball or a better slider, that kind of thing, or use it more often, maybe there's a chance there. The other thing to point out is during his days with Baltimore, his strikeout rate was always just under 9, almost 1 per inning. But the last 2 years, it's been 10, and this year it was almost 12. So, I mean, that's trending in the right direction. He's listed at 29 in our chart here. I think he actually spends most of the season at 30. That's a pretty interesting pitcher. Here's a good question, and I just want to answer it real quick. Ron asks, are we going to do another show like this after we see what the market might be? Hey,
it is impossible to know right now. Yeah, that's a great question.
It is a great question, and I think it's fair, and that's why I do want to address it. Players can start signing with other teams starting on Sunday, sometime Sunday, and we might start finding out, or we might find out that it's another late free agent signing, other than maybe a few of the names. And some teams that just want to get rid of some decisions early might sign some guys that are willing to take a deal now rather than risk a minor league deal later. But I think that's a good question. We may want to do a similar series right after the holidays or something, because I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of free agents still left. All right. So not a whole lot of comments on Gausman, other than I think we all really like him. I do think there will be some market on him as well. All right, we're each going to go. I'm going to go with my second pick, and it's kind of a similar. I mean, it seems like a lot of very similar stories here, and it's Robbie Ray. A year ago, if he would have been a free agent, he would have probably got, somewhere around 20 to 25 million a year, probably for anywhere from 3 to 5 years. He is a strikeout machine. He just turned 29. So he's going to spend, again, most of next season at 29. But his K rates, and I hate to look down and read this kind of stuff, but it's like I have to. His strikeout rates since 2016, 11.3, 12.1, 12.0, 12.1, and this last year, even in a bad year for him, 11.9 K per 9. This is a left-handed pitcher who misses a lot of bats. The problem this last year was the 7.8 K per 9. Normally he's been around 4. Most of the time he did have a year at 5. So he's, not a control pitcher by any means. But, again, this is why I'm most intrigued by him. 53% fastballs, at which he throws 93.5, 94 miles an hour. 31% sliders, 16% curveballs. I did notice that both of those breaking pitches were up a couple of miles per hour this year from the past. Maybe not enough separation from his fastball. Kept batters not quite as off balanced a little bit. I'm not a pitching coach, so I won't pretend to know. But with that mix and his ability to throw 2 breaking balls, this is the guy I look at and say, okay, what can Wes Johnson do? Now, I don't think he's going to come cheap. I think we had him around $10 million a year. But he's the kind of guy that I might just throw a 3-year, $30 million offer to right away early in the offseason and just say, hey, if you're willing to do this, we're willing to work with you and get Wes Johnson on you right away. So to me, this is an intriguing name. I hope it's one that brings some comments from you in the chat room. So please feel free to do that. He ended last year in Toronto after spending the previous portion of his career mostly with the Diamondbacks. I think he, like Smiley, came up with the Tigers briefly. So let's I don't even remember who I went with first last time, but let's go with Tom this time.
Oh. Well, the problem's right in his name there, Robbie, Robbie, as in base on balls. It's right in the middle of his name. That's the problem with Robbie Ray.
Good one. That's all you got there. And honestly,
I thought that was going to kill. Come on, guys. Come on.
I was on mute. I was laughing in my head on mute. Let's jump right to Nate now. Nate, you got anything?
All right. So I was looking at Robbie Ray a lot today, mainly because he seems to be one of those guys who's, I feel like he's been on Twins fans' tongues a lot, as we've talked through things. So I made it all the way to Urban Dictionary because I work with the youths, so I'm on Urban Dictionary a lot. So this is Buffalo, not Toronto. That is great. But Robbie Ray on Urban Dictionary is this, and I'm sorry for those who are not into girls, but this is about a girl. The most special girl you'll ever meet in your entire life. The first thing you will notice is that she is absolutely gorgeous. That K rate, right? Absolutely gorgeous. The second thing you will come to learn of this unique spirit is that she is one of the funniest, most energetic people. I think they were talking about, that's my wife, guys. She's awesome. But he was tinkering with his approach or the way he was throwing the ball. He was tinkering that motion. So we saw with Barrios as he tinkered with things, it took a little while, but eventually that took off. Lastly, you will notice that she is extremely stubborn and headstrong. And that's that walk rate. That's just awful. Lastly, an additional meaning for Robbie Ray, a person who's bad at directions. If anyone saw his pitch chart from the playoff game, he had a hard time finding that strike zone. But ultimately, I think as you're going, Seth, this is one of those things, if you can get him at the right price, you see what Johnson can do. If you could get some of those things figured out, he's going to be great. I mean, he's going to hover around that 12 strikeouts per 9. And even that, maybe still that's enough that you say when you're looking at the stead of the 3 ahead, you may overpay for a 4th, but maybe he's still someone that is interesting to come in and just be a part of the mix. It's someone who's going to miss bats.
You're not going to get that kind of research anywhere else, people. As any other live stream about baseball, looking up Urban Dictionary, you let us know. I think it's only here. This is it.
So real quickly, I want to remind people that this show will also be on the Twins Daily podcast, which you'll be able to download anywhere you download podcasts. So be sure to do that. And for those of you listening on the podcast, please note that as he started talking about something related to girls, Tom and I got a little uncomfortable, and then Nate's wife posted, "This is going to be good," which made us all laugh. And I think I posted it 3 times as Nate just kept going with the story. So that's why you want to watch this live and be part of the action here. So with that, just a few comments. Mike Link says the Blue Jays would sure recommend him. And again, Cody mentioned that they played in Buffalo this year, not Toronto, which I guess I didn't even think about. Sealk asks, any idea why his walk rate went up dramatically? Nate kind of alluded to the possibility that he was, tinkering a little bit. And we hope that whatever he was doing works or pays off for him at some point here. But I don't think any of us are necessarily pitching coaches. But clearly something was not right. Or it was maybe – there's some small sample size to it. But 50 innings, and that's a lot of walks. So let's see. Ron Brown suggests 1 year with a team option for Ray would be a good if you'd accept that. But Mike reminds us 6.62 ERA points. And that's why he's interesting, and that's why he's available. And he's probably available at 10 million rather than 20 to to $22, $23 million this offseason because he's young and he's had a lot of strikeouts and success in his career. All right, we each got one more. We got about 10 minutes left. So, again, we welcome your comments and feedback, and we're going to go to Nate for his next selection. Tell us a little
bit
about Anderson.
I honestly didn't even realize I picked 3 lefties for this. As we're sitting here, it kind of dawned on me. There's nothing special about Brett Anderson besides the fact that he's just going to come in. He's going to give you kind of a water level pretty much of starts. He's going to be able to eat up some innings for you. He's been doing that for Milwaukee for a little while here, who, as we saw, really kind of probably plays in a division that is similar to the division that the Twins are playing in as far as some of the talent level. At the same time, then he's someone, if you have one of the other guys pop up and really it's time to give them a spot, he's someone that you're not going to feel bad probably about just kind of sending away, either if you can trade him to someone for cash or something, or if you just need to kind of get rid of him. But yeah, I mean, he's not going to strike out a ton. He's going to limit some home runs. He's not going to walk a lot, but so nothing flashy. He's your number 5 guy, and he's going to eat up innings for you.
I feel the need to let the listeners know that when I reached out to you guys about your list, I wanted each of us to pick a high-level type that, you'd put in the Barrios, Maeda, Pineda category, one of the top guys. I asked each of us to do kind of a middle-tier guy in that, say, $5 to $10 million range for annual salary. And then I did ask each of us to pick a low-end guy, kind of like the Homer Bailey signing of last year. Rich Hill signed for $2 million last year. Homer Bailey was actually $7 million last year, I think. But kind of that guy kind of teetering on $5 million 1-year contract and maybe even a minor league contract. So that's where this level of pitcher. Otherwise, we could just talk about all of them. So, Tom, I'll let you kind of go with your thoughts on Brett Anderson.
He's sort of the anti-Robbie Ray in some ways, isn't he? He's a very good control pitcher, doesn't walk a lot of guys. Kind of almost feels a little bit like a left-handed Dobnak in some ways. And some team's going to get him, and he's probably going to provide excess value to the contract they sign him. But kind of going back to where we originally started, I'm looking for a little bit more upside if we're getting down to the bottom of the barrel. And Brett Anderson's going to be a lot more reliable than some of the other guys that I might target in this same range. And again, it comes down to the rest of the makeup of the Twins rotation. I think Brett Anderson makes a ton of sense for a lot of teams, but I don't necessarily think that, just in my mindset of what I'd be looking for, that he's really a guy I would target.
So I mentioned that early, that in October and November, I'm thinking much bigger than the Brett Anderson types. But I'm glad that we're including these types in this discussion. And as Cody mentions, health is number one concern with Brett Anderson. And, he's 33. He seems like he's been around forever. He pitched in 2019. He made 31 starts for the A's. That was the 3rd time in 11 seasons that he made more than 20, that made more than 19 starts in a season. There's always been a variety of injuries, but he made 31 starts in 2019, and this year he made 10 starts in the short season, and he pitched 47 innings. So, healthy for 2 years, and he's still just 33. He's, see what he's got left in his arm. Now, unlike Dobnik's kind of a 2-pitch pitcher. Brett Anderson throws up the kitchen sink. I mean, he's 43% fastballs at a fastball just below 90, which doesn't sound good, but that's what he was like when he was young. So that is just who he is. Slider, curveball, both at 10%, cutter at 11%, a changeup at 24%. He's the definition of a pitcher. He's a veteran. He's the definition of a veteran left-handed pitcher that you don't mind at the back of your rotation. Honestly, and this might sound dumb, but if you compare 1 year to 1 year and give me 2021, I don't necessarily think that if you looked at their numbers side by side, Brett Anderson's numbers are going to look significantly different than Dallas Keuchel's. And I might be completely wrong, but, I mean, they're the same type of pitcher. Throw strikes, let him hit it, use the defense, all that stuff. So if he can stay healthy, I'm good with this. Give him a $4 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million dollar deal. Put him in as your 5th starter behind Dobnik in the big 3. Hope he stays healthy, but also, like you said, if he doesn't, you've got other guys, and maybe by then Duran's ready. I'm going to kind of jump to the next one. And Tom, you mentioned Tyler Chatwood, and as I was writing up something that'll go on Twins Daily here, either yet tonight or tomorrow, one question is, why is he a fit for the Twins? And I frankly couldn't come up with anything. So please consider Tyler Chatwood is one to consider.
This is a guy. This is like the hate has gone too far guy. Yeah, he signed, and like you can't blame the guy. He signed a 3-year, $38 million contract with the Cubs, and it just did not work out. He made a grand total of 30 starts for the Cubs over those 3 years. Made 37 relief appearances in addition to that. But again, this is another guy who's only 30. Another guy who actually has good stuff. Just things haven't really worked out. That's sort of the common theme. It seems to be a free agent class that doesn't have a lot of really great top end starting pitchers. But, we're getting down to, this is the guy who I picked would be like the 4th, 5th starter type. And I think he's pretty interesting for that because he still throws 94 miles per hour on his fastball. He only made 5 appearances this year, but his first 2 starts with the Cubs this year, he got inserted back into the rotation this year due to injuries. He struck out 19 batters in 12 2/3 innings in his first 2 starts of this season. And then he had a forearm injury. He's expected to have a normal off season, working out and everything. So that injury hopefully won't carry over or impact his 2021 at all. This is a guy who also has some command control issues like Robbie Ray. He's going to walk a lot of guys. But again, I think just based off of his stuff, his cutter is a very, very good pitch. And this was that mindset of like, let me find a guy who I think could really be a weapon out of the bullpen. If you took some pitches away from him, Tyler Chatwood, like he could be a guy you sign as your 5th starter, and then again, come playoff time, you gear him up to be pitching out of the bullpen, and he could be a real weapon, I think, if he stays healthy that long. That's kind of the other thing with him too.
So it's definitely a big question. Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, I guess I am worried about the Twins needing another real starter. And so I like the theory behind it. If we were going 60 games again, I'd be all for it. I just really worry about that being able to give real starts throughout the whole 162 if we end up playing that. But I mean, I don't hate it either. It wouldn't be my preference, but I don't hate it, I guess. That's as much as I'm going to fight you, I think, Tom. Right there. That's my fight.
All right, we like the 12.1K per 9. The one concern also is obviously he's walked a lot of guys since he joined the Cubs, which was not what he did when he was, I think, with Colorado before that. But the other concern, of course, we talk about it a lot, but his season ended with just 18 2/3 innings because he had some forearm pain. And obviously that's close enough to the elbow that it does make you worry. But again, we're talking about guys that could be near that minor league deal type of thing, guys you don't necessarily feel bad DFAing if Duran suddenly is dominating at AAA or Balazovic is pushing his way up. So I don't have necessarily a problem with it. And I'm going to jump right away to my pick for that last spot. And he's probably a guy that is and should make more than a minor league deal. But I think he's an interesting talker, and that's Mike Fiers. He spent the last 2 years with the A's. And if you believe in things like win-loss record, I mean, he was 21-7 the last 2 years for Oakland. Now, this last year, his ERA was in the mid-5s, whereas the year before it was about a run per game less than that. He's made 28 or more starts every year from 2015 to 2019, so durability. Strikeouts, 5.6K per 9. He's not going to be a strikeout guy, for sure. But he seems to be almost a right-handed Brett Anderson with durability in that, his fastball tops out around 88, 89, and then he throws in his cutter. And having played against a pitcher who was, not a hard thrower, but then had that cutter, that's a tough pitch. A few curveballs, a few split fingers. Again, another guy that is going to throw strikes and be a pitcher. And he's probably the oldest guy I think we've got mentioned here at 35. My question with him, and I do wonder if and the reason I brought it up is I think it's a talker, and I think that it's something that will be interesting. As much as fans appreciate him, I'll say tattletaling on his Astros teammates from when they won the World Series, I do wonder how that's going to play with front offices. I do wonder how that's going to play with teammates, former teammates, current teammates. And I did do a little research on this. You know that the Twins, Derek Falvey, Thad Levine, they value the opinion of other people. They have put LaTroy Hawkins, Michael Kadire, Torrey Hunter in positions where they're going to talk to them about, having played with or against anyone they're about to sign or acquire. When the news came out, LaTroy Hawkins was having a conversation on Twitter with former big leaguer Preston Wilson. And Hawkins' response to Wilson was, #snitches. Don't understand how you can go to the media telling current – I can't even read my writing – telling current something, especially after you've benefited from it. But I guess I'm cut from a different cloth. Let's see what rabbit hole this winds up in. So again,
you gotta love LaTroy. LaTroy is the best.
Well, and I'm not even putting it down, but I think that might be a prevalent theme for a lot of teams and a lot of front offices. I'm curious how that plays for a pitcher who isn't exciting in terms of stuff, but he's durable, he's a veteran, and he's been on good teams before. So, any thoughts on that from the commenters? Or Nate, let's get your thoughts first on that.
Yeah, I think he feels a lot, and this is not like statistical based. This is very much just my eyes and anecdotal, just paying attention. He feels like how I used to describe Teran when he was with the Braves, that he's kind of one of those guys that you're going to get really good games sometimes, but you're definitely going to get the blow-ups a lot of times too from him. You go back, and if we go for the last 3 seasons, he's got a 3.85 ERA, and so that includes that 4.58 from this past season. He could just, like you said, he's kind of that Brett Anderson type, but just from the other side, from the other arm. So yeah, he could be that number 5 that, if as long as he doesn't upset the locker room, could definitely get some decent stuff coming through for the Twins.
Tom, I think most fans don't really care that he was a quote-unquote snitch or tattletale, whatever you want to call that.
I think most fans appreciate that about him. And I don't necessarily agree with what LaTroy is saying, but I just love that LaTroy will, you never have to wonder what LaTroy is thinking. He will straight up tell you. I love that about him. The way I see Mike Fiers potentially fitting on the Twins is if somehow there was an innings insecurity, like if you had one of those 4 guys that we have penciled in already, all of a sudden you have an injury concern and you just want to go out and grab somebody is going to provide you innings. That kind of fits Brett Anderson too. I don't think those are guys that you really see and identify and think that they fit into your plan A. Then all of a sudden, if you're in trouble and it's in spring training and these guys are available and you just need somebody to secure a spot in your rotation, Mike Fiers would make a ton of sense. That's probably how he'll end up getting signed this offseason, I believe.
All right. Sorry, I was on mute there. And I do want to remind people that this podcast will be available, but I'm posting up some user comments here that, people in the comments have used. So you're going to want to go to Twins Daily Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube and watch this later just to kind of see some of the great comments. And if in case I forget, thank you to those who have participated. Real quick, go to twinspayroll.com, which you can also find on Twins Daily. Matthew Taylor put this together. Some of the Twins Daily guys have kind of thrown some names out there, just trying to figure things out. Now, if the Twins have a 10% payroll reduction this year, you're looking at $125 million payroll, and you've seen this. If they drop it $20 million, now you're down to 110. Now, I immediately put, and you can't really see this, let me make that a little bigger. I put Trevor Bauer in there right away just to show what his $30 million would do. If you got $110 million payroll, he puts you over that without a 5th starter, any relief pitchers, or a bench. So let's change that a little bit. But so that's $30 million. But a lot of the pitchers we've talked about tonight, are guys that are somewhat risky. So, even if Bauer is a $30 million guy, the rest of these guys are probably $8 to $12, $15 million at the most. And you can do some things with that. So I do think they have some options as it relates. Now, again, we can put names in here, and I encourage people to use this tool. We'll put Kirilloff in left to replace Rosario. If we put Cruz in there at DH, we're already over the budget at $125 million. So again, let's take Bauer out, and we'll put Stroman in there. And hey, with Cruz and Stroman, we've still got 8 more spots to fill, but we got $15 million. So please go to Twins Daily, check out the Twins payroll. You can go to twinspayroll.com. Play around with that and just see how the various starters fit in, and let us know what your roster kind of looks like after you've done some of this as well. We do have a question here that I do want to throw out there, but first, Andrew said Myers is a guy that Terry Ryan would have signed 2 days into the offseason.
100%. 100%.
Yep, that's a very fair statement. And then I do want to get to a question Sealk asks, and it's a name that we thought about and wanted to put in here, but didn't. We only each got 3 names. So Taijuan Walker, real quick, Nate, your thoughts on Taijuan Walker? He had a nice little season.
Yeah, I think again, when you're at least, kind of my framework of looking at this season or this offseason coming up, he's someone that you can get in who will have upside, and you hope that the injury stuff's behind him. You hope that working with Wes Johnson continues just to move him in that positive direction. But I would be totally on board with that. He's someone that had kind of his walk rate goes up and down all over the place throughout his career. So maybe if you can figure a way to stabilize that, you get another real good starting pitching weapon.
That's a good segue. Andrew, who had made the Terry Ryan comment, actually, we published an article from him tonight that touched on Taijuan Walker at Twins Daily. So the title of that one was 5 under the radar free agent pitching targets. So I'll make you go and check that out. Actually, Drew Smiley was also one of the pitchers discussed in that article as well. So go over to Twins Daily and check out Andrew's article there. One guy I want to mention while I have the floor, I guess. For some reason, if you were to make me predict one starting pitcher, we haven't talked about him yet, that the Twins are going to sign, it would be Garrett Richards. He's a guy who throws 95. He's a guy who does have a spin rate. I don't know. There's nothing backing this up. I have no inside information. He's just a name that feels like that would make sense for the Twins. Garrett Richards, who was with the Padres last year, or this year, I suppose.
And I'm back. I don't know what happened, but somehow I clicked left the studio. I was panicking because I thought maybe the show had ended. And even though we're just over an hour here, we're just about done. And I did at least want to say have a good night to everyone. How about you, Nate? Tom mentions Garrett Richards. Is there another name on this list that you would be intrigued in and think that's worth consideration for the Twins?
I guess if they're going to go big and they're not going to end up with Bauer, Tanaka intrigues me. He's kind of just solid with what he does. And as long as he's healthy, as long as that, because he's got that elbow thing going on, and as long as that's not of concern, he definitely would be a guy that would come in and if you want to just, like we talked with Bauer, just have a real solid 4 guys, he would be one that would qualify for that.
Yeah, and I think part of why we don't talk about him a lot is I don't think anyone thinks he's leaving New York. Is that a fair statement?
That's what I've seen some of that too. It sounds like either he's going to stick with the Yankees or he'll pitch overseas. I don't know where it must be coming from somewhere.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe it isn't factual. I don't know his relationship with Kenta Maeda or anyone with the Twins. It's always fun to kind of try to find those connections with any free agent. We've got the Falvey connection as it relates to a guy like Bauer, and suddenly it makes sense for him. The name on here that I'm intrigued by, honestly, the most is probably the least exciting for Twins fans, and that's Jake Odorizzi. Again, he was he was hamstrung all season. Various injuries. I mean, when he showed us in the Zoom meeting after he was drilled by the Alex Gordon line drive, he actually showed us the mark on and how red and how many multiple colors were on that bruise. I mean, just the randomness of the season. I mean, just so many things went wrong. He was so good in 2019, and if he's your number 4 starter, you got a pretty good starting rotation. All right, so we're at an hour and 10 minutes, and I want this to. I don't want people to have to listen for too long. And again, before I ask my last question here to each of you and for our final discussion, I want to encourage people, send us your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We've had our comments and our Twitter handles and all of that on there throughout the show at various times. So feel free to reach out to us with any thoughts on the show. Reach out to Nick, head to Twins Daily. Let us know what your thoughts are, what more you'd like to see. I want to remind people I have a Twins Spotlight coming out with a Twins player. Probably not tomorrow. It'll probably be this weekend. And I know I've got another one with a Twins prospect on Monday. I'm going to try to do 2 or 3 of those per week. So feel free to let me know which players you'd like me to talk to, or others in the organization, and do that. And again, I will put this up on the Twins Daily podcast. You can find that at iTunes, at Libsyn, really anywhere you're able to find podcasts and download them. So be sure to check that out and subscribe. So with that, my last question. I started early in the show. One of the questions I asked was, what are some of those key attributes you're looking for in a starting pitcher for the Twins this offseason? And as you look at our names that we've talked about, we each added kind of one more name to our list that's intriguing to us. How did we do? Or do you think anything differently? And I'll start with Nate on this one.
I don't know if my opinion has really changed too much on what's going. I guess I'm maybe more open to like Tom was saying, looking for the more upside guys, not kind of almost settling for the Brett Andersons of the world. But yeah, I just want to see the team not get into these points where we're having to rely on the young guys to come in and perform, and more if they surprise us and come up and they force us to let them perform. That's what I would like to see be able to happen as the Twins go through the offseason.
Tom, any last thoughts from you in that regard?
My thoughts have completely changed. At this point, if a guy doesn't have an entry on Urban Dictionary, I don't want anything to do with him. That's a must. That is on my checklist now. Must have.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too, but I'll cross that off my list here.
You're welcome, everyone.
So as I was kind of researching these names, I noticed a couple things. One, left-handed seems to be something that we think they should at least factor into it. I mean, you've got Maeda, Barrios, Pineda, Dobnik, Duran, Balazovic, Chalmers. You're pretty right-handed heavy. I don't know that that's a bad thing. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but left-handed is something to at least consider. This market is Trevor Bauer and a bunch of guys with some sort of question mark, and whether that's Stroman after opting out a year or his lack of strikeouts, Robbie Ray with his strange year with still a ton of strikeouts, but a ton of walks. Gossman, what is he? Was the 60-game sample size enough? Or has his career, which has been solid? I mean, there's so many guys like that I think are interesting, either coming off of a tough year, short year, coming off of an injury, things like that I actually think there's some guys with some upside that the Twins or other teams, of course, could get for pretty good pricing. I'll stand by my thoughts that if the Twins are trying to go after a starting pitcher, they should be at least that Michael Pineda level. And that, probably is the first few that we mentioned, plus like Odorizzi, and then varying opinions. I also wouldn't mind them bringing in a guy to compete for the 5th starter job on a low deal, similar to the Bailey, similar to the Hill, compete with Dobnik. But I also have no problem in them saying, hey, Randy, we believe in your slider and your one-seamer. Let's work on that control and see if we can get it to last, a full season rather than the first 6 weeks. And as Nate alluded to, there are some prospects in Duran and Balazovic and Chalmers that are pretty exciting, that are pretty close. So to me, those are kind of my takeaways from this discussion. And I'm going to leave it at that. We're at 1 hour and 15 minutes almost. And again, want to thank Tom Froming. He's the content editor and provides a ton at Twins Daily. Nate Palmer, you can find his writing at Twins Daily as well, and he's been on some of these. Want to remind people there are Twins spotlights coming on this weekend and also on Monday. Be sure to check twinsdaily.com for those. You can find those on all our social media platforms as well. You'll be able to download this as well. The next off-season live is not until next Thursday. So we've been going Tuesday, Thursday with these. The next one, we'll be talking relief pitchers. I think Nick will be back for that one. But again, your feedback is welcome, so please reach out to us. with that, I want to thank everyone again for listening. I want to wish you all a great off season. We're not going to have any baseball to watch for a little while, so let's take our rest. Let's follow some Twins content daily. You guys all have yourself a great night, and go Twins.